Hello, my dear viewers. I am Olga Demchuk, a researcher of the inner world of personality. Today, I would like to talk with you about humanity and inhumanity. There will be a workshop, and I am gathering materials for it. I'm already sharing some of them with you now. Many individuals often imitate humanity's behaviors, and they are not even consciously aware of this phenomenon. In fact, from childhood, we are taught to imitate it. This is called socially acceptable behavior. When a person comes into this world, they are not yet a human being by right of birth, but it is precisely human behavior that allows us to create society, citizens, and the state. It's as if we silently agree among ourselves to behave in a certain way. There are norms, norms of behavior, norms of morality, and so on. And the very essence of our being, our fundamental core, may not truly evolve or change. We are much like a well-trained poodle that repeats certain predetermined actions, but does not genuinely understand the profound implications of what it is doing. Why is performing these specific actions, and what precisely will happen if they were to cease altogether? Today, I would like to show you the world through the eyes of a beast. I practice self-reflection, meaning I observe myself. I also have information from groups and from clients. And I would like to show you this perspective so that you can learn to distinguish between when you are looking at the world through the eyes of a beast and when you are looking through human eyes. What exactly happens to us, for example, when we enter a cafe or a welcoming restaurant? Our primal animal side always instinctively senses in such fleeting moments surrounding yourself with a hostile space. Hostile because unknown. For the beast, everything is new. It is dangerous. It is unknown, uncontrollable. And our animal part needs to set up markers very quickly. Name everything around very quickly. We, from the animal part, always use some very simple formulations. Not a bad cafe, or a cozy restaurant, or it's bright here, or there are a lot of flowers here. In other words, with this kind of phrasing, it's as if we're throwing a blanket over the world, and this world is no longer someone else's but mine. It was yours, now it's ours. This moment of adaptation of our animal part, it is felt by us if it is allowed to be recognized. That is, I went from the open space into a room. I feel a growing sense of profound anxiety, meaning this is an entirely unfamiliar and potentially threatening space, and the beast, if it doesn't mark everything around its immediate vicinity, will feel trapped and confined by this space. This feeling of being trapped is also from the beast. It could be a profound sense of being truly trapped by overwhelming obligations, or perhaps by a solemn given word. One might feel trapped by the fact that I am grateful to this person. He did something for me, and I already feel trapped. It is precisely because of this that sabotage happens, for example, at work. The beast is trapped by what needs to be done. For the beast, this is a cage. But we will talk about this in more detail at the webinar Psychoanalysis of Business Processes. Here, it is important for me to note this fact as a piece of the puzzle to put together the bigger picture. Now for you, this beast part of us, if you start to observe it, is actually very obvious. However, I observe this in my clients and in my own work. The hardest thing is acknowledging the non-human within ourselves. We are very afraid of dehumanization, of being dehumanized. That is, all of these beast aspects we have are the first to fall under taboo. Why? Because if I see these animal traits in myself, it feels as if I am already antisocial. That is, this society can cast me out as something non-human. It feels as if I no longer belong to these people. And with this video, I want to lift that taboo because everything that remains in the unconscious, everything that is buried there and not brought into awareness, ends up controlling us. And I want to break this taboo, and I want you to break this taboo as well. Then much of our behavior will become absolutely clear, and as a result, it will stop frightening us from within. Because the fear of the beast is overwhelmingly consuming. It fills the entire personality. And if we don't understand that this is something rising up inside us, we will be shocked by it and we won't be able to trust ourselves. We start looking for the cause outside ourselves in order to project it outward. So let's return to the cafe. I walk in and quickly scan the space. This is so I don't feel that awkwardness. That's what we call it, awkwardness. As if you don't know what place you should take in this space. And then, when you throw the comforting blanket of your own unique marking over the entire space, making it distinctly your very own, it seems as if the initial awkwardness disappears. But in reality, it's the beast deep inside that is calmed. Now, this is our space. I think that you've definitely noticed this in others. It gets harder to notice in yourself, of course. But in others, you can see how someone comes in, hesitates at first, and then suddenly they settle in as if they're at home. It's like when someone comes to our home and starts acting as if they're at home, even though we say, make yourself comfortable, feel at home. But in reality, that's not quite what we mean. Because our inner beast perceives such a person as a competitor, someone who is claiming my space, to take my spoon, to take my mug, to take my bowl, just like in the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And when we don't understand these reactions rising from within, we don't understand why we react the way we do, why words suddenly fly out of our mouths, words we later feel ashamed of. So here, we are legitimizing the fear of the inner beast in unfamiliar territory. In fact, to calm our inner beast, we need to know everything. We need to have answers, correct answers, and on every topic. And we try to finish our thoughts as quickly as possible so as not to leave things unresolved, to calm the beast within. And in this cafe, we feel our fear. And along with the animal's fear, aggressiveness begins to rise. Because the beast can only compensate for its fear with aggressiveness. In fear, it is small, in aggressiveness, it is large, and from this smallness, the animal escapes into aggressiveness, as if someone has placed a stool for it. It falls into the pit of its own fear, and then it stands on this stool, and as if it rises above it all. I think you've also noticed that in unfamiliar environments, irritability increases. And with other people in unfamiliar places, it's always easier to notice in others there is increased irritability, heightened dissatisfaction. And until a person settles in, until they mark the place as their own, they remain constantly on alert. That is, it's a constant expectation of an attack. When we understand what this feeling is, when we understand why it arises, the first thing we need to do is accept our fear. In other words, not to deny this fear, because if we deny our fear, if we don't turn inward to ourselves with calmness, then aggression, irritability, and dissatisfaction immediately follow. And from the outside, it looks like the person is aggressive, but they themselves don't realize it. If you ask them what's wrong, they will sincerely say, I'm afraid. Even though they've already become aggressive, having moved past fear into aggression that compensates for a sense of inadequacy. This state of weakness, confusion, and inadequacy is, in fact, natural for a person. That is, we really are weak, we are small, very small. From one perspective, we are just one among all of humanity, small compared to a 5-story building, small compared to a tree. But only the human mind can withstand this smallness, because this smallness is built into the objective picture of the world. For in beasts, smallness is unbearable. That is why the beast constantly strives to be great, great in suffering, great in inadequacy, the most miserable, the most beautiful, the main character in a grand drama that it creates within itself. In other words, it is a constant attempt to leap into a vast, overwhelming fear. or into a great overwhelming drama, or into an immense love. So it is a constant attempt to fill oneself with oneself and not let the world in. Because if I let the world in, I immediately become small in this vast world. But when I have my own world, then I am the queen, even if it is just a tiny world, a little jewelry box. Now, about people, how does the beast look at people? When someone looks at us with beast eyes, we sense it immediately. But when we do it ourselves, we don't notice. What happens when we look with beast eyes? We judge. Just remember how you chose potatoes or apples at the market. It's an appraising, sizing up look that scans around, searching for what it wants. This comes from a desire to possess, to consume, to take something in. That's how people look at each other when they're choosing, for example, in a bar. Women look at men appraisingly, and men look at women the same way. When I want to possess something, it's about taking it inside myself. And for the beast within, it's quite difficult to look at another person. No, that's not quite right. If I don't look with human eyes, then with beast eyes, I will look at others in a very uniform way. I will be judging them, judging or devaluing them, or devaluing myself next to them. For the beast, there's always an assessment of danger going on. It needs to know everything, to understand everything. Even if I am worse than him, I need to know that. I need a quick marker. If I don't have a marker, the unknown frightens me. It's better for me to be worse, but at least that's a fact I've come up with myself. This quick labeling brings a sense of relief, and the other person is dragged into consciousness as a partial object, as a flawed object. In other words, we don't keep the image of a person, a real subject. Instead, we keep a flawed object, some idea of them that we have, and we sincerely believe that our idea of them is equal to the actual person. We can't think of another person as truly other, because then we would have to make room for them. It's not my toy that I can toss around as I please. It's another person. That means I need to share my world, let another world in. A beast cannot do this. If there is too much of the beast in us, it becomes impossible for people to learn. When it comes to learning, to new information, a person who reacts in a beast way either feels afraid of it or attacks it aggressively. If it doesn't match their world, they attack it aggressively. That's not right. That's not it. That's not true. Because they can't let it in. The beast world is fragile. It has to be established and unshakable, unambiguous, primitive, and always the same. The animal part of us wants everything to be the same, for everything to always remain unchanged. And we start to wither and grow bored in this monotony. And even variety itself feels strange, as if we need to change the people around us. In other words, we change the external movie. We focus on changing the external movie because we can't give ourselves a different perspective on the world. When there is another perspective and then yet another, the world becomes full of interesting and new things. This act of casting a glance at a person turns them into an object to be dragged into a burrow. That is, to look at a person as someone different without labeling them or assigning them markers is difficult. And when we try to perceive someone in a human way, it always requires effort. It is always hard work, but the animalistic response is automatic and based on reflexes. All beast emotions and reactions are automatic, and they come instantly, immediately, reflexively. A beast doesn't think about how to react, it's automatic. And many people say, well, emotions are automatic. Well, yes, if the beast side prevails, then that's true. If there is no consciousness. So in fact, we are constantly at this crossroads between the beast and the human, between the beast and the human. And we cannot get rid of the beast within us. It will always be there. We're not saying that we need to do something about this beast side. It will remain. We need it for survival, for quickly assessing situations. But if we distinguish between the beast and the human within us, then we gain the opportunity for deeper understanding. My primal instinctive assessment of a person is like this, but I know it's primitive and it needs to be made more complex in a human way to be observed. In reality, I don't know who this person is. I tell my inner beast, I know this is that person, just so it doesn't get agitated, so it calms down. But in truth, I don't know. You can communicate with someone for 2 years, then something happens, and you realize that you never really knew them at all. This beast side, it doesn't allow us to see the real nuances. This assessment that comes from the survival instinct, it constantly deceives us. It's a constant, unreliable information that it keeps supplying us with. Because if I have already defined this person, that's it. My psyche no longer wants to explore them. It has already labeled them. But in reality, when we interact with someone on a human level, we truly get to know them more and more, even more, and still more. And the file keeps getting overwritten over and over again. For the beast part, this is tedious. It just wants to define and be done with it. And you can tell when others interact with us from inside that box. We ourselves often don't notice when we approach others from our own beast box. But when others interact with us that way, we can feel it. They're not really interacting with us. A person asks some questions, says, "Well, you'll like this." Or they say, "I know you think the same way." And you realize that the person isn't really talking to you. It's this damaged object part, a partial object, not a subject dragged into the mind. That's what the person imagines when they think about you. Not you, but this partial damaged object. We think in exactly the same way. So when we have a simple, primitive, and unambiguous idea about a person, it means we're dealing with a partial, damaged, primitive object. Kindness is not inherent to a beast. It only has pity. It feels pity. That is, I look at another with a beastly gaze and I rejoice. I look for compromising information, looking at him, meaning his weaknesses. Weaknesses. And these weaknesses automatically become my strength as I elevate myself by seeking out weaknesses. And we feel, as I mentioned, this gaze that searches, looking for flaws and faults. Many people, or rather some commentators, watch a video and immediately spot a flaw. And it's as if they latch onto it and hear nothing else. They seize on that thought and write something about it. This shows that the beast has found where to sink its teeth, right into that gap that opened up between the armor. And that's it. It bites down and can't let go, just keeps tearing at it. That's how we are when we argue with someone. We find some little thing, latch onto it, and our inner beast just can't unclench those shark jaws. It holds on and keeps tearing at the same thing over and over, again and again. This is our obsessiveness, our compulsiveness, and our fixation. That comes from the same place. The beast, in fact, is obsessive compulsive by nature. It clenches its emotional jaws and can't let go. It keeps thinking the same thing over and over. It needs rituals. Only through them does it find calm. Familiar walls. Even if I enter an unfamiliar room, I immediately bring my own familiar walls, my own rituals with me. I've brought my little cage with me into your space. I'll sit in it and behave according to my rituals. This is ritualistic behavior. For the beast, spontaneity is inaccessible because when we start to be spontaneous, we most often become aggressive. That is, it's a constant restraint of aggression, a constant holding back that crumbles from within. It's either fear or anger, over and over again. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is currently one of the main topics of my research, and I am interested in the question of how a person who comes into this world can become truly human. How can we help a person become truly human? Why? Many people perceive humanity as a weakness, but that's not the case. The human mind is much more effective than the beast mind. The beast mind is only suitable for some simple situations, simple actions, and that's fine. But the human mind can think in terms of cause and effect and strategize. And all these pattern behaviors, this imitation of being socialized, it turns into understanding. In other words, you don't force yourself to act this way. Rather, you begin to behave like this because you understand cause and effect relationships. You understand the consequences and it becomes your free choice. You don't feel constrained or conditioned as if the world is forcing you to be this way. It is always your choice because you understand the consequences. When you ask what to do, you want me to turn you into trained poodles who are told how to do tricks. But I always want you to be human, to learn to think, to understand yourself, and then to make a choice. Understand and then decide whether you want to act this way or not. Understand the consequences and then choose not to choose. You see, thinking is one of the signs of being human. A beast has a reflex reaction, quick and instantaneous. And a beast can only be kind out of pity. So I started to say this. Let me finish. Out of pity, that is, you see, this beast gaze, it seizes on compromising information. It is better at that. But in order not to assert itself at the expense of this little person, it begins to feel pity. This is a kind of beast pity that allows one to feel at least a little bit human. So it's not really a person, but through pity for others. And I only feel pity for the weak, not for the strong, only for the weak. It's as if I can feel humanity and kindness. This urge to pity, to save, it's a kind of animalistic rescue, more about self assertion than genuine care for others. And at first glance, none of this is visible through formal signs. Here, you have to be honest with yourself and look deeper within. When the beast side prevails and we haven't brought it into our awareness, we don't understand and we can't change or learn. This is what worries me the most. I see it in my clients, in groups, how difficult it is for a person to change. That is, when the beast listens to information, it either runs away in fear, meaning it turns off the video or shuts down the mind, hears nothing, or it starts to attack, to argue with the information. In other words, there is no skill of listening, of letting information in. And it turns out that even if a person listens and nods, then he is simply confirming what he had. He is, as it were, yes, the world. That is, there is nothing new, it does not get there. That is, we need the evolution of the personality, but it is impossible until this beast part is brought into consciousness, until we become truly human, because the beast will immediately attack everything foreign and immediately assert its own. I'll be finishing. The topic is wonderful and big. Maybe even my third book will be about her. And by the way, my first book, False Self, Real Self, is available on the website. If you'd like to explore these ideas more deeply, you can find them developed in greater detail in my work. And if this way of thinking resonates with you, I invite you to stay with this channel, to subscribe, to like the video. This will help us not to react automatically, but consciously. Later, we'll talk about procrastination and we'll discuss it a lot. And we will talk about this excessive emotional charge that prevents us from absorbing information, literally how we overload ourselves. Write about what you know about your own beast, what you can already observe in yourself and can talk about without rejecting it as something natural, but with the understanding that this is not humanity. This legalization, especially when it's public and you can talk about it calmly, is a sure guarantee that you will recognize it in yourself and won't invent other explanations besides what is actually there. I say goodbye. See you soon.